So we have time for questions. Joel, or is there anyone else? Yes.
I just mentioned earlier, you mentioned, I think, how long, you said that was a quintessentially Jewish beginning of something. But I just want to mention, I guess because yesterday was Martin Luther King holiday, it made me think of that famous phrase from one of his speeches when he says, how long? Not long.
Right.
And they keep going on like that.
Right. Yes, yes, you're absolutely right.
And then I had an actual question.
Now, your question about how long, where does it come from? I think I can find it because I'll tell you what, just one second. I remember I quoted it in the finale of the second act of Hannah, and as Joe mentioned, that this libretto has footnotes. so I'm going to look it up right now, just a minute now.
It's your album?
Yeah. How long must the, yeah, this is 35, oh, wait a minute. Yes, I have it. It's 35C. Just a minute, I'll tell you exactly where it's from. 1 second. 35C. The Jerusalem Talmud, 25C. Jerusalem Talmud. How long must we be tortured and humiliated by the oppressors? Jerusalem Talmud. That's where it's from.
One more question?
Okay.
Sure.
So I didn't remember either. I'm glad you took my memory on that.
About the lady in the lake.
Yes, Lady of the Lake.
With the dramatic scene with the blouse and the numbers.
Yeah.
Now, the people I know who survived the Holocaust, yeah, it's on the arm.
Yeah.
So was there any true, I mean, of course, I didn't know any people who were children and survived the Holocaust. They were all at least teenagers and survived. So I was wondering, was there any truth to the idea that a child maybe, because it says when you thank you for sharing, it said that it was, as you said, when she was a child,
Yeah.
they tattooed it across her chest.
You know, I don't know that. I don't know the answer to that question, and Ellie wouldn't either, I'm sure, because it was Malamud's story.
Oh, okay.
And I wish we could ask him,
Yeah.
which we can't.
Wondering if there was any truth to it or if it was dramatic license.
License. Well, it wouldn't surprise me if it was dramatic license, because
The little.
Malamud was a little bit breast obsessed in his writing. I mean, seriously. Some of the critics have talked about the pectoral dichotomy. You know, in Malamud, the woman who is full-breasted is maternal, and the woman that is small-breasted is dangerous. You know, I mean, this is true. Not in a lot of Malamud's works.
So if Leonard Bernstein had known that about Malamud, wouldn't that have clued him into the fact that he probably didn't lean towards being gay?
Bernstein was bisexual himself. He had 3 children with his wife.
Yeah, right.
And there's an expression in the gay community called rough trade.
Oh, right, I've heard of it.
You know, where people try to seduce men that wouldn't otherwise be interested in men.
Oh, but I thought that rough trade meant, I was very little, I thought it meant like they try to seduce a rough sailor or something. I didn't think they,
Yeah, well, that's what.
I didn't think rough trade would refer to trying to seduce an esteemed writer.
You're right. You're right. I misused it. I used it because that was the preference of Blitzstein. Blitzstein was gay. I mean, well, he too was married for a short time,
Who was that? Who was? Oh, Bernstein.
Mark Blitzstein and
okay.
Mark Blitzstein and Leonard Bernstein had a tremendous amount in common. Their fathers were both named Sam. They all had Steen at the end of their name, which they insisted on pronouncing Stein. They were both married, but were more homosexual than heterosexual. But both were bisexual, they probably were lovers as well. I mean, each of them was a lover of Aaron Copland and probably of each other. So Bernstein knew all this, and he may have thought that Malamud did. What Malamud didn't, or didn't want to know, and didn't want, and was just revolted by the whole thing, you know.
That was kind of before gay liberation.
Oh, of course, yeah. And in 1970, I was at the Bennington College Composers Conference, and I called up Malamud, and he was in the hospital, and he left a message. But when he got back, I reached him, and he said, I don't usually take cold calls, but since you mentioned Mark Blitzstein, he was a very good friend of mine, I will see you. And I went over to see him, and I told him, you know, that I had just looked at it first, and I was thinking about finishing it, and I played him some of my music, the Bourgeois Poet, as a matter of fact, the setting of Carl Shapiro, and particularly a piece called The First Time, which ends with a prostitute turning on a young man of 17 saying, "Are you a Jew?" And Naumann really liked that. And so he gave me the go-ahead to do that. You know, I was a nobody. I mean, he would have been happy to have Leonard Bernstein, Ellie Siegmeister, David Diamond complete this work. I was just a student. But because Ellie recommended me and because he listened to my music, he gave me the go-ahead. It was quite an experience. When I finished it, the first person I played it for was Ellie Siegmeister, and he sat me down on piano and looked at me and said, "Alfano," referring to the completer of Puccini's Turandot, Franco Alfano. Yeah. And then he approved it. Nadia Boulanger had also gone over with me, although I finished it when I came back from studying with her. Played it for Bernstein, and then I played it for Malamud, in that grandfather song, there are a couple of footnotes, because originally Blitzstein had written, "I go up the steps, that my heart was knocking so," and Malamud said, "I wouldn't write that." And I said, "Well, it's Yinglish." He said, "Yes, but it's not my Yinglish." And he's right, it was ungrammatical. So I changed it to, "I go up the steps, oh, my heart was knocking." And he liked that. I played it for the Blitzstein estate in Philadelphia, and Joe Davis, Mark's sister, said, "I want Lenny to hear this. So please call Helen Coates." So I called Helen Coates, and she got back to me. She said, "Well, Mr. Bernstein is working on his ballet, The Dybbuk, right now, and he's very, very busy, but I'm sure he'll be glad to know that this is happening." So I called Joe Davis back to tell her that, and the first thing she said immediately was, "Call David Diamond." Diamond was a really fine composer who was a colleague of both and a dear friend of both Blitzstein and Bernstein. And I called him, and I said, "I finished Idiots first." He said, "What? You finished Idiots first? That's impossible. Nobody could finish it." I looked at that opera. Nobody could have finished that. I said, "Well, Bernstein said he was going to finish it, and I could." "Well, all right, make an appointment. Come to my office." So I went to his office at Juilliard, and I sat down and played and in the meantime, Richard Flusser of the After Dinner Opera Company, who had done some of Blitzstein's work in the 1950s, heard about it and called me and said, "I want to hear this." And I said, "Well, come along, David Diamond doesn't want." "Oh, I know David Diamond." So I met Richard Flusser and David Diamond at Diamond's office for the first time. And I played them the score, and Diamond said, "Oh my God, yes, this was the opera. Mark played this for me. In fact, this is how he sang this part." Right? This was not the opera that I was shown after his death. I must have been shown The Magic Barrel, of which there is not nearly enough to finish, but yes, there was enough to finish, and I'm so glad you finished. I'm going to call Lenny. At home, there's a message from Helen Coates. "Mr. Bernstein is taking a breather, and he'd like to see you." So that's when I went up to see him. And as I said, played it for him, and he sat down next to me and turned pages and sang it an octave lower. And later, Richard Flusser told me, because he knew Bernstein very well, that when he spoke to Bernstein about me, Bernstein said, "Leonard Lehrman is Mark Blitzstein's Dybbuk." So you see, it all comes back to that. So,
Okay.
I think I've answered your question. We have a little more time. Are there more questions? Joel, do you have any questions?
I have a question, I think
Yes,
it's
go
a
ahead.
little tiny question.
Go ahead.
I think you already mentioned it, but I don't remember what it was, which is,
You said that Mark Blitzstein died young.
Yes, 59, 58.
Was it related to AIDS or nothing to do with?
No, he was murdered.
He was murdered.
Yeah, he was trying to
By
pick up.
rough trade?
Exactly.
Yes.
Wow.
Precisely. In Martinique.
Martinique. What did he say?
He
We've
was
got
murdered-
to
he was
explain
murdered
it again.
by some Portuguese sailors, Portuguese sailors,
Sailor.
who he was trying to pick up, and they robbed him, left him half naked in the gutter. He was taken to a hospital. He identified them. They were convicted of third-degree manslaughter. He died of his wounds. He was scheduled for a hernia operation, and he had internal bleeding that the hospital didn't notice until it was too late. He was gangrene, and he died. Yeah, it was tragic. It was absolutely tragic. It happened during what we call the season of death. John F. Kennedy, November 22nd. Herbert Lehman, Paul Hindemith, and Mark Wittstein, all within 3 months. The other season of death that's related to what we're talking about today is Leonard Bernstein, Aaron Copland, and Ellie Siegmeister all died within a couple of months of each other from 1990 to 1991. Yeah, happens. But Wittstein's death was hidden for a long time. I mean, first they said he had an automobile accident, and they tried to keep it out of the papers, but eventually it did come out. Now he's considered an icon of the LGBT community, having died for his predilections. More people know about him having been murdered and having been a gay composer than know his music, unfortunately. His music is what really is much more worth knowing. And I tried to do that. In fact, my book was written as an answer to the first, there have been 3 biographies of Blitzstein. The first one came out in 1989. It was written by Eric Gordon. He's not really a musician, but he's a historian, a gay historian. And he was trying to make the case that Mark Wittstein died because, and was neglected because he was gay. In fact, he wasn't neglected because he was gay. In many ways, he was better known because he was gay, because he had more connections than Ellie Siegmeister, for example, who wasn't gay and didn't have those connections. But he did write this book about Wittstein, and the wonderful thing about the book was that it said, "Idiots First" is a great piece, and it really should be done. And as a result of that, the Center for Contemporary Opera, Richard Marshall, had been toying for years with doing Tales of Malibu. And Richard said to me, "Oh, if you can find me $20,000, we can do it." The Bel Canto Opera Company had done it when they said, "If you can find me $2,000, we can do it." And I said, "Well, how about if we do it without orchestra, and I can find you $1,000?" He said, "Okay." So my father sent $2,000, and then we raised it from Friends of Blitzstein. That was in 1978. 1992.
Before Kickstarter, right?
Yeah, way before.
Yeah.
Way before Kickstarter.
Yeah. But in 1991 and then March of 92, finally, the premiere occurred. And it was largely because of Eric Gordon's book, because Richard Marshall, having read that, said, "We've got to do this." And he said, I'll find it. I'll find the money for it. And he found everything but a theater. And then I found him a theater, which was NYU. There was a director there that I worked with in Indiana. It was, it's all networking. We say in the library business, it's not who you know, it's whom you know. But that's how that happened. And then my book came out in 2005 for Blitzstein Centennial, and it was a kind of an answer to Eric Gordon's book, where I had criticized his book as being more about Mark's sex life than it was about his music. And he said, "Well, you write a book about his music and see if it sells, right?" So, so I did, and Eric's sold a few thousand, I've sold a few hundred, so so he was right in this doing sense. But I wrote that book in order to get all the material out about his music, more than his life. And then Howard Pollack, who had written excellent biographies of Gershwin and Copland and a number of others, wrote what we had hoped would be the definitive biography of Blitzstein, combining both his life and his work. And I was hoping that he would do what Eric Gordon had done for Idiots First. I was hoping he would do for Sacco and Vanzetti by saying, "This is an opera that should be done." We've got one more minute, I think. I want to talk just a little bit about Sacco and Vanzetti. This is an opera that was written in part in Israel, and it's not really a Jewish opera, although it has a Jewish aspect to it. At one point, you all know who Sacco and Vanzetti were. Yeah, I don't have to tell you. Okay, there was a panel of 3 judges that were supposed to advise the governor of Massachusetts on whether to pardon Sacco and Vanzetti or not. And there's a scene where one of the judges, who was actually robbed in Italy, says, "It is a well-known fact that all Italians lie and steal." And Abbott Lowell, the president of Harvard, who's a well-known anti-Semite, chimes in, "Just like Jews." So that's the extent of the Jewish question in Sacco and Vanzetti. But that opera was Wittstein considered his magnum opus. He had been working on that case. He'd written an earlier opera, a choral opera called The Condemned, which was never produced. He rated parts of that for different things, including Sacco and Vanzetti. And I finished that. Now, The Idiot's First only took me 3.5 years to finish. Sacco and Vanzetti took 25 years. Because with Idiot's First, I was able to fill in things, and I didn't have to write any new music. For Sacco and Vanzetti, I had to finish the libretto, go to the court transcripts, and find music of, Blitzstein had taken some of his own music and reused it. I had to find more of his music and reuse it, and then create some things myself, and that's why it took so long. But that opera was finally produced in August 2001 at the White Barn Theater, and all the critics who attended raved about it. And then came 9/11, so nobody wanted to do an opera about anarchists as heroes and cops as villains. And on top of that, Opera News wrote a diatribe. A man named Joel Honig, who later died of renal cancer, wrote a diatribe having attended a symposium and not even attending a performance. You know, it reminded me recently, the Klinghoffer debate. People were saying, oh, you shouldn't criticize the opera without attending a performance. Well, damn it, Opera News criticized my opera without even attending a performance. And they got hell. 14 letters, a storm of protest, which they printed 5, and the rest we posted online. But despite that protest, Sacco and Vanzetti has not had the production it deserves. That was just a semi-staged one with piano. And we were hoping that Howard Pollack's book would really go to bat for it, but he tried to be even-handed, and he quoted this bastard, Joel Honig, as if it were worth quoting. And so the opera really hasn't had the chance that it deserves. We're still working on trying to get it done. Half of the Blitzstein estate now belongs to the Kurt Weill Foundation, and they're very interested in Blitzstein as translator of Threepenny Opera, although they won't promote his translation of Mahagoni. I don't know why. It's a very good translation. And they have promoted Idiots First. They have not promoted Sacco and Vanzetti. I don't know why. Yes?
Why do they call it Idiots First? What is that?
There's a saying.
Is it about idiots?
Well, okay. There's a saying when there's a shipwreck or something. Who goes first? Women, children, and idiots first. That's the saying. Women, children, and idiots first. Yeah. Yeah. It's an old saying. And
We're too nice to know about that.
Yeah.
We know
And-
women and children first, but
I mean, this-
idiots.
Women and children first, but not idiots.
I don't like that, it makes it sound like women and children are idiots.
Well, it's totally politically incorrect now. You don't say idiot anymore. You don't even say retarded. You know, you
No, I
say
think it
learning
means
challenge.
Precisely,
Right.
those who are weakest go first. That's what it means.
That's exactly what it means. That's exactly what it means. But that's where Malamud got the phrase. Idiots first, and it's often been
I've also
confused.
never heard it before.
It's often been confused with Robert Sherwood's Idiot's Delight. In fact, I once heard Malamud confuse himself. He used Idiot's Delight when he meant Idiots First. But it's okay. The title character is Itzhak, the retarded son. He's 35 and has the mind of a 3-year-old. And before Mendel dies, he wants to send his son to his uncle Leo, because Mendel has a rendezvous with the angel of death, whose name is Ginsberg, at midnight. And this is all through the opera. He knows that he has to raise the money in order to send Itzhak to California. And
Right, and the opera's an odyssey of him asking different people for help
Right.
for the money. He goes to a rabbi and ends up.
Helene played the rabbi's wife, who turns him down, but then the rabbi actually gives him his new coat.
His new kaftan, his fur kaftan.
Right, to
and
take
he-
to the pawnbroker to get the money for the train station. And then Ginsburg blocks the way, and then there's a whole argument there. And then somehow even Ginsburg, even the death, the angel of death takes pity. The story is fascinating because it is a combination of Jewish and Christian mythology, which Malamud specialized in. He was married to an Italian Catholic. And that's why the Lady of the Lake is also, the conflict between the identities of Jew and Italian. And in Idiots First, you've got the Akedah, the story of the sacrifice of Isaac. And you've also got the story of every man, the morality play. Every man knows that he has to meet his maker, and who will go with me? And no one will go with him, not riches, not wealth, not anything but good deeds will go
By
with him.
idiots, do they mean retarded people? Retarded. I see.
I just want to mention related to this, it's totally unrelated in a way, but
You know the thing from Passover where there's like the smarts, I forget the wording, smart son.
The 4 children, or 4
the
sons,
four
yeah.
sons,
Yes,
and one of them is like, doesn't know anything.
yeah.
And somewhere I read something, I don't know if it was a joke book or what, but it wasn't really, it was sweet. It was, they said that the wives, the girlfriends who became the wives of these 4 sons, and they mentioned various things. And then when it comes to the one who doesn't know anything, who you could say is an idiot, but I think it meant it was very simple.
Simple son,
They
yeah.
claim that he ended up with the most beautiful wife.
Yes.
It was a very sweet ending. But I think maybe it meant that he was so simple that he didn't know how to be, guileful. He was like
Yeah.
guileless or something.
Yeah, yeah.
I don't know, it's just an interest, I don't even remember where I saw it.
Yeah, the tale of the 4 sons is fascinating, and it's in the first poem of the bourgeois poet collection of Carl Shapiro. He goes into that, and we always, Helene always sings that in my setting of that at the Seder, because there's so many ways of looking at it. Usually, it's actually, the son, the 4 children are he who knows and knows that he knows,
Yeah.
he who knows and knows not that he knows,
Uh-huh.
he who knows not and knows that he knows,
Uh-huh.
that he knows not.
Uh-huh.
And then he who knows not and knows not that he knows not.